December 7th, 1941. A peaceful Sunday morning in Hawaii suddenly turned into one of the most shocking attacks in modern history. Within just a few minutes, explosions filled the sky. Battleships were burning in the harbor, and thousands of American sailors were fighting for their lives. But the most surprising part of this story is that the United States was not even part of World War II at that moment. So how did Japan manage to launch such a massive surprise attack on the powerful American naval base at Pearl Harbor? How did a young cook named Doris Miller become one of the heroes of that day? And how did this single attack eventually lead to the only nuclear bombings ever used in war? To understand how one morning changed the course of world history, we have to go back to the rising tensions of World War II. Welcome back to Docupeak. Our story really begins earlier in 1941, during the middle years of World War II. At that time, the world was already divided into opposing sides. Adolf Hitler had allied Germany with Italy, while countries such as Britain, France, and the Netherlands were fighting against them. The United States had chosen to remain neutral. After the heavy losses it suffered in World War I, the American government wanted to avoid getting involved in another large war in Europe or Asia. But tensions were growing in the Pacific region. One country that was rapidly expanding its power was Japan. Because Japan had very limited natural resources, its leadership believed expansion was necessary for survival. Over time, Japan took control of territories such as Korea and Taiwan and launched a major invasion of China in 1937 during the Second Sino-Japanese War. Japan's ambitions did not stop there. It also had its eyes on resource-rich areas in Southeast Asia, including Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines. The problem was that these territories were not independent. Malaysia was under British control, Indonesia was ruled by the Netherlands, and the Philippines was governed by the United States. Western nations saw Japan's expansion as a serious threat. Japan had also signed the Tripartite Pact, bringing it closer to Germany and Italy. In response, the United States decided to apply economic pressure. In July 1941, the U.S. government imposed an oil embargo on Japan. This decision was extremely serious for the Japanese economy. Japan had very little domestic oil production and relied heavily on import. Around 80% of its oil came from the United States. America made its position clear. If Japan withdrew its forces from China, the oil supply could be restored. But for Japan, this was a difficult choice. Pulling out of China would damage its reputation and weaken its position in Asia. On the other hand, without oil, its military operations could not continue. Japan's leadership decided not to withdraw from China. Instead, they planned to capture oil resources in Southeast Asia, particularly in Indonesia. However, reaching Indonesia required passing through the Philippines, which was under American control. Japanese military planners knew that any attack in the region would likely trigger a response from the American Pacific Fleet stationed at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. To avoid immediate resistance, they created a bold and risky strategy. Their plan was to launch a sudden surprise attack on Pearl Harbor itself. If the American fleet could be disabled, Japan would gain time to expand across Southeast Asia. Preparation for the attack began secretly. Japan assembled a powerful strike force that included 6 aircraft carriers carrying more than 400 aircraft, supported by battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and submarines. To maintain secrecy, the fleet avoided radio communication as it traveled across the Pacific Ocean. After traveling roughly 8,000 kilometers, the Japanese fleet reached a point about 370 kilometers north of Pearl Harbor. From there, the aircraft prepared for takeoff. On the morning of December 7, 1941, the first wave of Japanese aircraft approached Pearl Harbor shortly before 8 a.m. The American forces at the base were completely unaware of the incoming attack. The first wave began bombing and firing on ships, airfields, and military facilities. For about 45 minutes, the harbor was under intense assault. Torpedoes struck battleships, while bombers targeted aircraft lined up on airfield. Many Americans initially thought the attack was a drill or a mistake, but within minutes, the situation became clear. Fires were spreading across the harbor, ships were sinking, and the sky was filled with smoke. Shortly after the first wave left, a second wave of Japanese aircraft arrived and continued the attack. In total, The assault lasted about 1 hour and 15 minutes. The damage was devastating. 8 American battleships were heavily damaged or sunk, nearly 20 naval vessels were destroyed or severely damaged, and more than 300 aircraft were lost. Thousands of American servicemen were killed or injured. During this chaos, Doris Miller performed an act of remarkable courage. When a torpedo struck the USS West Virginia, many crew members were injured, including senior officers. Miller helped carry wounded sailors to safety. After that, despite having no formal combat training, he operated an anti-aircraft machine gun and fired at the attacking planes. His bravery during the attack later earned him the Navy Cross, making him the first African-American sailor to receive this honor. When the Japanese aircraft finally returned to their carriers, the attack had achieved its main objective. But it also triggered a powerful response. The next day, the United States officially entered World War II and declared war on Japan. The country that had tried to stay out of the conflict was now fully involved. Over the following months, American engineers worked to repair and recover the damaged fleet at Pearl Harbor. Many ships had sunk in shallow water, which made it possible to refloat and repair them. In April 1942, the United States carried out its first direct air raid on Japan during the Doolittle Raid, when American bombers attacked Tokyo and other cities. The war in the Pacific continued for the next several years, with intense battles across islands and oceans. Gradually, Japan began losing territory and resources, but it still refused to surrender. Finally, in August 1945, the United States decided to use a new and extremely powerful weapon. On the morning of August 6, 1945, a Boeing B-29 Superfortress named Enola Gay flew over the Japanese city of Hiroshima. At about 8:15 a.m., it dropped an atomic bomb known as Little Boy. About 43 seconds later, the bomb detonated above the city. A massive explosion produced an intense flash of light and a huge fireball. Temperatures near the center of the blast reached thousands of degrees Celsius, destroying most of the buildings in the city. 3 days later, on August 9th, another American bomber dropped a second atomic bomb called Fat Man on the city of Nagasaki. These 2 atomic bombings caused enormous destruction and loss of life. It is estimated that around 200,000 people eventually died as a result of the explosions and their effect. Shortly after these events, Japan announced its surrender to the Allied forces. With that decision, World War II finally came to an end. The attack on Pearl Harbor had pulled the United States into the war, and 4 years later, the conflict concluded with one of the most powerful and controversial weapons ever used in human history. If you enjoyed this documentary from Docupeak, make sure to like and share the video. Thank you for your support and for the thoughtful comments you leave on the channel. I will see you again in the next great video.